I never thought a single sentence could make a room feel like it was swallowing me whole. But when I heard her, just a whisper, barely audible over the hum of the evening air, say, "I regret choosing him," something inside me froze. I had been leaning against the doorframe for 10 minutes already, pretending to check my phone while stealing glances at her. Catherine, mid-40s, impossibly graceful, with this quiet strength that made her laugh feel like sunlight slipping through blinds. I had known her for months now, helping with small projects around her apartment. Little fixes, groceries carried, coffee runs. And yet somehow, every interaction felt like it was charged with unspoken rules I was too scared to break. The apartment was silent except for the occasional drip from the kitchen faucet, the low hum of her old air conditioner, and the faint scrape of my own heartbeat echoing in my ears. She was perched on the edge of her velvet armchair, knees together, fingers brushing the rim of a coffee mug she hadn't touched. Her eyes were fixed somewhere far away, soft and distant, like she was speaking to someone else entirely when she spoke those words. But I heard them. I didn't move, couldn't. My throat was dry, my hands itching to reach for her, to explain that I wasn't him, that I didn't even know what I was. Something in me wanted to run, to leave before she realized I had been standing there, listening. And something more stubborn and stupidly hopeful wanted to step closer and stay. Her hair fell in gentle waves over one shoulder, catching the light from the lamp, and for a moment, she looked younger than her years, more fragile. She twisted the mug in her hands, and I noticed how her knuckles were pale, how her nails were chipped, small human details that made her real, not untouchable. I wanted to speak, to say something that might undo the weight of that confession. But words betrayed me. I couldn't form a sentence without it sounding like a lie. So I stayed silent, letting the pause stretch, hoping she would turn and see me, hoping for a glance, a spark, a sign that she knew. She might know what I was feeling, even without me saying it. Then she did something that made my stomach tighten. She shivered, as if a memory had passed over her like a cold wind, and hugged herself. It wasn't a defensive gesture, I realized, but one of longing. A question. Vulnerability wrapped in the warmth of solitude. My chest ached at the sight. I finally stepped forward, careful to make my movements subtle, just enough to let her know I was there. Not as a threat, not as a judgment. My footfalls on the rug were soft, but she didn't flinch. She didn't even look up yet. "Catherine?" I whispered, almost too low for her to hear, and then the moment shattered. The shrill ring of her doorbell sliced through the room like a knife. Her head jerked toward the sound, eyes wide. My heart sank. Whoever was outside, whatever had arrived, it wasn't me. Yet, in that instant, I knew nothing in that room, nothing in her voice, her gaze, her trembling fingers, would ever be the same again. And somehow, in the silence that followed the bell, I realized I couldn't walk away, no matter how much I wanted to. The doorbell echoed in my chest long after it stopped ringing. Catherine went to answer it, and I stayed by the window, pretending to be absorbed in the city lights outside. But I wasn't looking at the lights. I was thinking about her, about how someone like me, barely out of college, could be standing in the doorway of a life that seemed impossibly distant, impossibly hers. I knew some of her story. She had been married for nearly 20 years, a union that had started with laughter and late-night dreams, but had frayed into routine and quiet disappointments. Her husband was distant, I guessed, polite but emotionally unavailable. I had sensed it in her small size, the way her shoulders slumped when she thought no one was watching, the way she lingered on the details of her favorite memories as if trying to hold them together with sheer will. And me? I had a history too, though less complicated in years, more chaotic in mistakes. A few failed relationships, some bad choices, and a lingering feeling that I was always too young, too impulsive, too naive for the kind of love I craved. But with her, everything was different. With Catherine, I wanted to slow down, to study her every movement, every hesitation. I wanted to understand the fractures in her life without forcing her to explain them. There it was again, that forbidden pull. The age gap, the circumstance, the unspoken rules of the world that told me I should step back. She was my mentor in some ways, older, wiser, with a history I could never fully step into. And yet, standing there, watching her turn the lock, my heart refused to obey caution. When she came back, she carried a package from downstairs. Her hair had fallen in messy waves, the kind that made her look effortlessly beautiful, and for a moment, I almost forgot the weight of everything between us. I wanted to reach for her hand, to brush a stray strand of hair from her face. But I froze, caught in the gravity of wanting something I shouldn't, and yet feeling like it was the only thing that mattered. "I didn't expect anyone tonight," she said softly, not meeting my eyes. There was a flicker of something, embarrassment, longing, in her voice, and it nearly made me stumble over my words. "Neither did I," I murmured, stepping a little closer than before, close enough that our shoulders almost brushed. My hand itched to linger, to offer comfort, to create a spark that might change everything. She finally looked at me, her eyes holding mine for longer than they should have. The silence stretched between us, heavy and electric, filled with words we couldn't say aloud. Her fingers brushed against the package she carried, and I noticed how tense her knuckles were, how small gestures spoke volumes. And then, almost imperceptibly, our hands met. Not on purpose, maybe not even consciously. As I reached to take the package, our fingers lingered for a heartbeat, trembling slightly, before pulling away. That brief, accidental touch. It spoke more than either of us could say. And in that moment I realized, the risk didn't scare me nearly as much as the thought of letting her go without trying. I hadn't expected him to come home so early. Her husband, quiet, steady, and somehow larger than the room itself, stepped into the apartment while I was still lingering near the kitchen counter. My heart slammed against my ribs like a trapped animal. I froze, the coffee mug still in my hand, the brief warmth from our earlier touch lingering like a dare. "Catherine." His voice was calm, but there was something in the cadence that made her stiffen. I watched her shoulder tense, her grip tightening around the package I had handed her. She didn't answer right away. It's just, I stammered, feeling suddenly exposed. My fingers curled around the mug as if it could shield me from the reality of the situation. Her husband didn't look at me directly. Instead, he leaned against the doorframe, eyes flicking to the clock, to the mail scattered on the table, to everything except us. I could see the way Catherine's chest rose and fell, rapid, shallow breaths betraying her calm facade. I wanted to disappear, to melt into the shadows, to erase the heat of my gaze from her entirely. And yet I couldn't leave, couldn't step back. Something invisible tethered me to her, stronger than fear, stronger than reason. Finally, she spoke, her voice quiet, hesitant. I wasn't expecting you home." He nodded slowly. "I left work early." His glance flicked to me this time, sharp, assessing. I forced a polite smile, nodding in return, feeling ridiculous, out of place, too young, too much, yet somehow right there in the middle of the storm. After a few moments of silence, he went to the bedroom, closing the door with a soft click. The sound left the apartment hollow, echoing, and I realized we were left suspended in something neither of us wanted to name. Her eyes met mine across the kitchen counter, a mixture of apology, tension, and something darker, longing. I noticed the small, nervous habits I had started to memorize. The way she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear, the almost imperceptible bite of her lip, the slight tremble of her fingers. I could have memorized every inch of her nervous gestures, every quiet sigh, and still not fully understood the storm behind them. "I should go," she whispered suddenly, as if the words themselves were dangerous. I shook my head, a futile attempt to make my feet stay grounded. "You don't have to." My words faltered as I saw her hesitation. She was battling something invisible, some barrier I wasn't supposed to cross, yet desperately wanted to. We moved closer, almost unconsciously, drawn by the gravity that neither of us admitted. My hand brushed against hers again, deliberate this time, and I saw her inhale sharply, not pulling away but not letting go either. The air between us hummed, thick with the kind of tension that could ignite at any moment. She began, then stopped. The unspoken words hung like smoke, curling between us, teasing, dangerous. I could read everything in her eyes. The guilt, the desire, the fear of crossing lines that couldn't be uncrossed. The sound of her phone buzzing broke the moment. She glanced at it quickly, her brow furrowing. Whoever it was, the interruption felt like both a relief and a punishment. The text on the screen read, "Dinner. Don't be late." She set the phone down but didn't look away from me. "I can't," she whispered, voice trembling slightly. The word wasn't just about dinner. It was about everything between us. I took a small step forward. "Then maybe later. Or we'll figure it out." My voice was steady, but my chest thumped wildly. She didn't respond immediately, just let the silence stretch, her fingers grazing mine once more before pulling back reluctantly. Then, before I could say anything else, the doorbell rang again. Not downstairs this time. Someone was at her building, someone unexpected. She froze, eyes wide, heart racing, and for the first time, I saw genuine fear. Her vulnerability was raw, unfiltered, and it tethered me to her even more tightly. I didn't know if we'd make it through this night without everything falling apart. I didn't know if we could resist the pull we both felt, or if the walls we'd built around ourselves would crumble entirely. But one thing was certain: I wasn't leaving. Even as guilt, risk, and fear clawed at the edges of our fleeting closeness, I could feel her hand almost reaching for mine again. The air between us vibrated, loaded with possibility and danger, and I realized that nothing, not age, not circumstance, not her husband's sudden presence, could erase what was quietly, impossibly growing between us. And then her eyes met mine again, wider now, questioning, desperate, and I understood. We were already past the point of turning back. The apartment felt smaller somehow, the air heavier, as if it was aware of what was simmering between us. I paced near the window, pretending to check my phone again, though I couldn't focus on the screen. Every shadow, every faint creak of the building made my chest tighten. Catherine sat on the edge of the sofa, knees drawn together, arms wrapped loosely around herself. Her gaze was distant, but there was a fire flickering behind it, a mix of frustration, longing, and fear. I wanted to reach for her, to bridge the invisible gap, but the reality of everything we were dancing around made me hesitate. And then I saw it, a picture frame on the shelf, her husband and her, smiling at some long-ago vacation. The image stabbed me, a cruel reminder that this pull between us wasn't just complicated. It was wrong. My stomach churned with guilt, but even as I looked away, I couldn't stop my eyes from seeking her. Every subtle movement she made sent an impossible thrill through me. "I can't," she whispered suddenly, her voice breaking. She glanced at me, and for a fleeting second, I thought she might confess everything. The longing, the regret, the temptation she tried so hard to ignore. But the words didn't come. Instead, her hand twitched toward hers, then retreated. I swallowed hard, trying to steady myself. "I know," I murmured. I don't want to make this harder for you." Her laugh was bitter, half a sob. "You already have." I flinched at the honesty in her tone. She wasn't just talking about me. She was talking about herself, about everything she'd buried for years. I took a cautious step closer, our proximity electric, almost unbearable. "You shouldn't be here," she said suddenly, sharp, though her eyes betrayed her. She wanted me to leave, to erase this tension, but her voice shook, betraying her own desire. I closed the distance anyway. "I can't," I whispered. "Not when—" I trailed off because saying it aloud, saying that I wanted her, that I was desperate for something forbidden, felt like crossing a line I wasn't sure we could ever return from. Her breath hitched, and for a moment, the room was filled with nothing but the unspoken. I could see her body leaning just slightly toward me, then recoiling. Her hand brushed against the arm of the sofa again, trembled, and I knew she was as torn as I was. The tension built, snapping tighter with each heartbeat. I wanted to close the gap, to hold her, to erase the years of restraint and loneliness with one reckless move. But she was still Catherine, careful, measured, haunted by the past, and I didn't want to destroy her with my impatience. Then, the sound of a car horn from the street below made her start, and we both jumped back slightly. Reality crashed in, reminding us that the world outside didn't pause for our impossible pull. And yet, in that split second, our eyes locked again, a silent acknowledgement passing between us. We couldn't deny it any longer. I wanted to reach for her again, to close the distance that fate and circumstance had stretched between us. But I stopped, just short of touching her. The room seemed to hold its breath, waiting for a decision neither of us could yet make. And then, the sound of a key turning in her door. The key in the lock stopped turning before it had fully opened, and I froze. Catherine's eyes widened, her lips parting slightly, and I could see the tension coil in her shoulders. Something was wrong. Before either of us could speak, the door swung open, and not who I expected. It wasn't her husband. It was her daughter, just back from college, early for some reason. She stopped in the doorway, blinking at the sight of me standing too close, at Catherine's tense posture, at the electricity humming between us. What's going on?" Her voice was sharp but edged with confusion, suspicion. Catherine's face went pale, and I felt my stomach twist. The carefully constructed world we had been tiptoeing in had just collapsed. Her daughter had seen the tension, the proximity, the nearly forbidden closeness. And in one moment, everything felt exposed. "It's nothing," Catherine said quickly, her voice too clipped, too defensive. She stepped between us, a shield I could feel even as it kept me away. But it was too late. I could see it in her daughter's eyes, the disbelief, the suspicion, the quiet judgment. The risk we had both been dancing around wasn't hypothetical anymore. It was concrete. And somehow that made the pull between Catherine and me stronger, more urgent. I wanted to speak, to explain, to say that nothing had happened, that I wasn't trying to replace anyone, that this was complicated. But words stumbled over themselves, clumsy, inadequate. Her daughter finally stepped forward, a little too boldly. "Mom, who is he?" The question wasn't accusatory, not yet, but the implication hung in the air like a storm cloud. Catherine swallowed, her lips pressing together. She glanced at me, and I could read the apology, the worry, the desire not to hurt anyone, layered over the longing she still couldn't hide. I didn't expect you back so soon," she said instead, voice trembling. She reached out to her daughter but stopped midway, uncertain, conflicted. I stayed quiet, my chest tight, realizing that the safe lines we had been walking were gone. Every glance, every micro-gesture, every brush of fingers that had seemed insignificant now carried weight, carried risk. Her daughter looked between us, suspicion morphing into quiet frustration, and I felt the heat of Catherine's gaze on me. A mixture of fear, desire, and determination. Something unspoken passed between us. We couldn't turn back now, not after this, not when the heart had already decided. I wanted to reach for her hand, to anchor us both against the chaos, but I stopped, aware that the next move could change everything. Her breath caught, her eyes flicking toward mine, and in that instant, I understood. No one outside mattered. Only this fragile, dangerous connection mattered. And then her daughter's phone buzzed. A message flashed across the screen, and I caught the edge of it. "Mom, is he?" The question was incomplete, but the weight was enough to make time feel suspended, to make the room hotter, smaller, closer. Catherine's hand trembled slightly as it hovered near mine. My heart thumped in impossible rhythm. The line between desire and disaster had vanished entirely, and we were both standing right on it. The apartment felt unbearably small. Her daughter's question still lingered in the air, a sharp reminder that the world outside could not be ignored. Catherine's hand hovered near mine, trembling, as if she were testing the boundary between what was safe and what was inevitable. "I can't," she whispered, voice breaking. Her eyes searched mine for something. Forgiveness, understanding, perhaps permission. "I can't do this. I can't." I swallowed, my pulse hammering. "I know," I said softly. I don't want to hurt anyone, but I can't pretend I don't feel this either. Her gaze flickered downward, and I could see the weight of years of choices, of love and regret pressing on her shoulders. She was trapped between the life she had built and the pull she couldn't ignore. I shouldn't even be standing here, I continued, voice low, deliberate. And yet, I can't leave. Not tonight. Not like this. She drew in a shaky breath, and for a moment, the world outside ceased to exist. Her fingers brushed mine, tentative, searching, and the electricity that had been simmering for months ignited in that touch. I wanted to close the gap, to hold her, to erase all the years of restraint, but I hesitated. She needed to choose. I needed her to choose. Her lips parted as if she was about to speak. Then she stopped, shaking her head slightly. A single tear traced her cheek. I don't know if I can, she admitted. Her voice was raw, unpolished, human, and somehow that honesty made everything real. I don't care about the rules right now, I whispered, leaning closer. I need you to know how I feel. That I'm here. That I'll stay here, even if it's messy, even if it's wrong by everyone else's standards. She looked at me, eyes shining, lips trembling, and finally, she closed the distance. Her forehead rested against mine, breath mingling, hearts pounding in the same rhythm. We didn't speak. There were no promises, no declarations. Only the quiet understanding that, for the first time, neither of us had to pretend. Her daughter's footsteps echoed faintly in the hall, a reminder that this moment existed in a world of consequences. Yet, in that small apartment between two flawed human hearts, there was clarity, connection, something impossible yet undeniable. I wrapped my arm around her, careful, tentative, as if any sudden movement could shatter the fragile peace. She leaned into me, finally, completely, her vulnerability laid bare. And in that embrace, we both understood. We could face the world outside, one step at a time, but nothing could erase this, nothing could undo the pull that had always been there. I could feel her heartbeat, rapid and uneven, and I let myself memorize it. Not the perfect love story, not the tidy, expected conclusion, just real, messy, human. And then, the apartment was silent again. The world waited. The consequences waited. But for now, it was just us. Together, trembling, uncertain, but undeniably together. The morning light filtered softly through the curtains, painting Catherine's apartment in a warm, golden haze. I sat on the edge of the sofa, her hand loosely in mine, both of us quiet in the aftermath of last night's storm. The world outside had resumed its rhythm, indifferent to the tiny revolution that had happened in this apartment. But inside, something fundamental had shifted. She stirred, stretching slightly, the familiar lines of her face softened by sleep. I watched her, memorizing the curve of her smile, the way her eyes caught the sunlight. After months of tension, stolen glances, and almost confessions, the space between us had finally collapsed into something real. I still don't know how this happened, she murmured, voice husky, but there was no shame in it, only honesty. I never thought I'd feel this way again. I tightened my grip on her hand. Neither did I admitted. But it doesn't matter. We're here now. There was a long pause as she leaned back against me, her head resting lightly on my shoulder. The apartment smelled faintly of coffee and lingering rain from the night before, small details that grounded me in the reality of us. Messy, complicated, imperfect. We didn't need to speak much. Words had often betrayed us before. Silence was easier, truer. And yet, in that silence, there was understanding. A promise not yet spoken, not yet written in law or society, but alive in the small gestures. The brush of fingers, the tilt of a head, the shared heartbeat of two people who had crossed boundaries, risked everything, and come out holding each other. Her daughter had left for college, leaving a faint tension in the apartment that neither of us addressed. We both knew the world outside wasn't erased. There were consequences, conversations to be had, lines that couldn't be ignored forever. But for now, the present, this quiet morning, our fingers entwined, The small, trembling smiles was enough. "I don't want to lose this," she said finally, eyes meeting mine, vulnerability raw and open. "You won't," I whispered. "We'll figure it out. Together." And in that moment, I realized that love didn't have to be perfect to be true. It didn't have to follow rules or timelines. It could be messy, hesitant, even forbidden. And still, it could survive, grow, and find its place in the quiet spaces where hearts finally meet. We stayed like that for a long time, letting the city hum outside, letting the past and the world wait. A future uncertain, yes, but ours. Bittersweet, fragile, and entirely ours. And I knew this. Whatever came next, whatever judgments or challenges awaited, we had crossed a line from which there was no turning back. A line that didn't lead to destruction, but to possibility, to connection, to something fiercely, irreversibly human. I brushed a stray strand of hair from her face and whispered, almost to myself, "We made it. Somehow we made it." She smiled softly, leaning into the warmth of the moment. "Yes," she breathed. "We did." And as the sunlight danced across her face, I couldn't help but wonder, C6.